How do you use data to facilitate or encourage that change process and accelerate it in some way?
So that's where the storytelling comes in, because I do think storytelling with data is a skill set that unfortunately not that many people have, because I don't think very many people prioritize it. They're so focused on the analytical ability, on learning the machine learning model, the fancy, exciting stuff, but they don't take that step to understand the whole storytelling process. Part of the storytelling is understanding your stakeholders, how comfortable are they with data, and so on and so forth, to then be able to say, okay, let me build a narrative around this. Let me share the data and the insights and the trends that are most relevant to different parts of this narrative. And let me share it in a way that is very easy to digest, right? Using effective visualizations, effective design, color, to really build the story around it, to in some cases bring up those emotions or that desire to act that you might not have if I just throw a bunch of data on the screen.
How do you think data changes the way people experience the place that they work in?
A few different roles in terms of supporting the ecosystem. So one is in terms of understanding kind of your current state. And by understanding your current state, you can start to find areas of the organization where you need to focus. So employees feel like they're getting all the love that they need, they're getting developed, they're fulfilled, they feel valued, and so forth. But managers are complaining because I can't keep people on my team long enough to get the value out of them. They come on my team, they finally start being productive, they move on to someone else, right? So managers are feeling the pain. Or, I don't have time to continue to have these career conversations or whatever it may be. So you start to understand what parts of the process may need some focus and attention. Another role that data plays in this is to be able to support your business case. So we spent a lot of time on how you build out the story to get people to accept your recommendation, right? And that's essentially building out a business case. The third is that it allows you to then track and measure whether or not the process is working over time.
In that sense, like, data kind of determines how resources should flow within that ecosystem, also determine how much should go there so that you don't overwhelm something with too much. And what impact does it have once I get those resources there? Does that particular part of the ecosystem kind of revive itself? Does it start to become more productive? Does it become more adaptable? Apparently there's, like, with big forests, they've always seen trees as individual, entities, but actually there's massive, massive networks underneath where some trees actually feed other trees nutrients when they're lacking them in terms of minerals and stuff. So underneath the surface, there's this entire ecosystem that's busy moving resources around to try and keep the whole thing alive. And kind of just having this chat makes me think that data is the mechanism by which resources are moved to places where they can be most absorbed or utilized, and then measured in terms of the impact that they have.
I love that kind of connection there. But it will also tell you, okay, let's look over here where the nutrients are very dense and it's a very, very healthy part of our ecosystem. What can we learn from here that can then inform what we can do over here where maybe it's kind of suffering a little bit, right? That's another role that data can play.
As a kind of ecosystem architect in the data space, what do you think some of the most significant challenges are with this data enabler when you look at organizations? What are the biggest challenges? I think you've mentioned a few, the culture, the fact that, is there data? Do you have to go and find it? Do people act on it? And so on. But what do you think are some of the bigger challenges that you face?
There's two, and the second one is very much related to the first one. So the first is the challenge with data quality, availability, and reliability. So quality being how clean, how accurate, how consistent. Does this data point today mean the same thing it meant last year, the same thing it will mean a month from now? Availability meaning, can I access that data? How easy can I access that data? And the reliability being, how is that quality and availability maintained over time? The second challenge when it comes to HR data and people data, but also connecting that to other business metrics, is that I think organizations often still treat kind of the process and then the data and the analytics as separate parts. Usually the process is designed, right? We need a recruiting process, or we need a succession planning process, whatever it may be. Or sometimes it just happens organically because things are moving fast. Nobody, sits down and designs it, but people just start doing it. And then the data and the analytics is an afterthought. It's something that comes later. And so what happens then? That impacts the data quality, the reliability, and so forth. And so your analyst or the people analytics team ends up having to spend, and I find myself doing this with some of my clients, you spend a lot of time cleaning the data, trying to understand the data. When was the data good? When was it bad? And honestly, a lot of times that means that there's some data that I just can't use anymore. I've also seen on the people analytics side where they're building tools, think reports and dashboards, or nowadays AI. And I've seen many times where they're built or they're purchased, and then training is provided, and then they just expect people to use them without taking that step back to think about, how does this fit into the process? What is the process? Where should it fit in the process, and so forth? So then what happens? People don't use them. And then your people analytics team is asking, why aren't you using my dashboard? Because it doesn't fit into my process. It's extra work and I don't have extra time. So instead, the ideal kind of scenario should be that the two kind of come hand in hand. If you are at the liberty of designing a new process or redesigning a process, already start thinking about, what data points are we going to collect along the way, and where do we want to inject analytics into the decision-making process?
That's a really, really good point, in that processes generate data, but very few times do the people designing the process go, where is the data being generated? Because each one of these steps could be incredibly insightful if we thought about it from a data first perspective. What would you think are some of the guiding principles that should be used to design, data for maximum impact?
So one term in terms of guiding principles or success factors that I would point out is, if your organization does not have a data culture, they don't think data is necessary to make decisions, I would say one step is to put some concerted effort in helping them to become more data literate, more understand and appreciate the importance of data. Providing visibility around how is this data used, why is it important, and so forth, increases adoption and behaviors that will support better capturing of data, better quality data. The other thing in terms of, you need somebody who can be that consultant, that translator, that connects the dots between the business challenge and what we can do from a data and analytics perspective.
You're having to be both the data person, the business process person, and the people manager. How's this person going to react to this data? How do I share this data with them at the right level of their maturity? How do I understand the business processes that are involved? And then how do I work with the data as well? It's quite a combination of sometimes paradoxical skills to be both analytical, and I think sometimes people forget how much you need to be able to read the room when it comes to data.
For sure. I mean, I think most cases, your analysts or your data scientists and this kind of consultant or translator role that I described are different people. I think, at least traditionally, they serve as kind of that middle person between the highly technical and the average business person. There are people out there that do have both, and I think it's going to become more and more common as people analytics starts to become more popular and get more mature. A lot of people in HR that do get data will start to be attracted to that kind of career path. So maybe they have a very strong HR background, and then they learn the more technical analytical side, and so they play that role pretty well. And then there's also AI tools in general that are going to help. you're starting to see this ability to go in and natural language ask questions, and then the tool will help give you the insights, right? So now you don't need necessarily that consultant. You just need an HR person who is data literate, who can use tools to do some of the more technical stuff. And then they're able to continue to do what they do well, which is manage the relationship, take care of the employees, and so forth.
For a mid-sized business, I'm thinking maybe data has some kind of value, but how do I access? What type of capability would I need to access?
So I'm going to answer this in two parts. I think which one would add more value is going to be the one that has that rich subject matter expertise, stakeholder management capability, and so forth, with just enough technical capability to be able to get some insights, to be able to understand what the data is telling them and how that translates to recommendations. Unfortunately, within the HR function, there aren't necessarily a lot of people that have that 70-30 mix. And so it might be hard to find that person. The limitations of being able to either find that person and hire them with the budget that you have, with maybe the attractiveness in the market that you have because you're not this big name brand, or the time it's going to take to upskill and train the HR person you have, not even touching on, are they interested? Do they want to? Do they have the propensity to learn it, and so forth? So if you have those limitations, then the other option is not necessarily a bad option, right? Because again, they're able to do the more advanced analysis and so forth. They know just enough that maybe you don't go and send them to make the recommendations in front of the sales leadership team or what have you, but they know just enough that they can have an effective conversation with the person in HR. And so then you kind of share those to the person in HR that maybe is not quite as technically inclined. So, whatever it is that for your organization is going to help you move the needle more quickly, which then helps you get more resources and funding to build the capability further to be able to then kind of exponentially expedite the value that you're adding to the organization.
So do something that is going to have an impact and show value in a short period of time for a relatively low cost, so that people will go, we should do more of that going forward.
Exactly.